it's a nicer transition than, say, throwing a 16-year-old in the deep end like we did with Walcott in 2004. So do you really want Calvin Phillips or a player of his ilk who's playing week in, week out against Wycombe Wanderers and Burton Albion?
I don't know, Jeff, has he? I must have missed that.
Welcome back to the Commentary Box Podcast, all sports and nothing else. My name's Arjun, and we've got Kieran with us today. How are you, mate?
I'm doing all right, thanks, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Recently, Sky Sports and a few of those other big dogs have spoken about the England squad, and I thought, early on, halfway through the season, with about 5 or 6 months to go to when the Euros actually happen, I think it's a great time to sort of look at what the England squad could be, and the players that could be in it, and the selection choices, really. So to kick us off, I have a strong opinion on this, but I'd like to know yours. So should the England squad be picked based off of just quality, or should form and recent performances be a bigger factor in picking a squad?
I'll say form should play a bigger factor than it has recently. But I'm going to bring another thing into the equation. I'm going to say fit as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of the chemistry between the players. I think that plays a big part. But no, that's one thing that has frustrated me with Southgate's selection, less so than previous England managers, is that national team selection seems to rely a lot on a manager's favourites and quality rather than form itself.
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point about the links and the chemistry of players, and I think it is important that where there is a partnership, and a very good partnership of English players at a club, that Southgate utilises that in international games and international tournaments, because obviously international players are together for maybe 2-3 weeks before a big tournament, whereas club players are together for the whole season, aren't they? And potentially even a couple of seasons. So I think that's one thing that should play a big factor.
Yeah, and it's good to see a lot of exciting young English players now actually getting the opportunity to play together at club level.
Yeah.
Villa comes to mind, actually, really.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so moving on from that, you mentioned the young guys playing, and I know back in the 2008 to 2012 era where Spain were very dominant in the international tournaments, I believe they did have a bit of a policy where the youth players did have to go through the under-21s and under-23s to make it into the first team squad. Do you think England should do that? Because I see a lot of young players that are playing. So, for example, Jade Bellingham's only 17.
Yeah.
I think, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good way to, especially seeing how other European teams have done it, Germany and Spain. It's a good way to cultivate that chemistry again between players over an extended period. And if you're in successful youth teams, you're going to breed that culture of winning as you move up. And it can be, I think it's also nicer to shield the players from the limelight. No one really watches under 21 games unless you're really into football, I don't think. So being able to perform at that stage at an international level, getting that experience it's a nicer transition than, say, throwing a 16-year-old in the deep end like we did with Walcott in 2004.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of guys like that. Walcott. I think Wilshere went to an international tournament young. You had a couple of guys, and I think that maybe, I mean, Rashford's an exception to that, I think. He's continued to develop and perform. But I think there's also those guys like, your Mason Mounts and Tammy Abrahams from a couple of years ago who played a big part in one of the youth team's European successes. They've had that opportunity to sort of grow together as a whole youth team. I think that's quite important as well.
I definitely hear that. I think Hudson-Odoi was part of that same group as well. He's not kicked on as much, but I definitely hear that, and I think England should utilize that system more. And I think they have. I mean, what's it? Southgate was under 23's manager.
Yeah.
Or under 21's manager. My bad. And he's brought through a fair few of those players that he had at that level.
Yeah.
So, I definitely agree. I'd love to see more of it.
And just going back on your point about sort of the form players and fitness, to what extent should players be guaranteed a spot in the squad?
I think outside of 2 or 3 key leaders, you shouldn't, no one else should feel that comfortable, to be honest with you. You have to be in there. You have to be earning your spot. And I'd say for England, outside of Henderson and Harry Kane, I can't think of anyone I would say is absolutely nailed on to be there every single time. You need those leaders in there for sure, and those leaders need to be respected as well. But outside of them, I don't think anyone should be guaranteed a seat on that plane.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think there are a few more than just those two.
Yeah,
I think.
With them. What do you think?
Well, I'd say Raheem Sterling is quite proven, and he's got the quality. I'd also say a player like Declan Rice. I think he's sort of confirmed his spot in the England squad for years to come now. I'd personally like him to be in the squad for as long as he plays at the top level. Okay. So, I'd say also the likes of Rashford. These guys are all consistent though. That's the thing. They may have
they're all consistent performers.
Yeah, they may have a blip of maybe 3 or 4 games, but they're going to bounce back at the end of it.
Yeah, they have that class really.
Yeah.
I hear that. I still think personally, think if it comes and there's a poor season for Rashford, you don't take him on that plane. As much as I love Marcus, you don't take him on that plane. Same with Sterling. He has a dry run. You don't want him there because I'm not convinced of their leadership abilities. But no, I understand your point in terms of the fact that they are putting in those consistent performances, and as a result of that, they should be there. Yeah.
And we talked about these guys playing for top sides in the league, and I know at the end of the last season, there was a bit of a debate on Calvin Phillips being in the England squad.
Yeah.
But obviously he was playing for Leeds at that point, and they were in the Championship last season. So, I mean, should it really matter if a player is playing at the top level, or not just the top level, but for a top side? Because there are a few Championship players and maybe bottom half players that are good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. Because the quality is obviously there in the Championship. The question I think comes down to the quality of football at international level. Is that if England want to be winning tournaments, they want to be playing and beating the best sides, and those best sides, they have players that are regularly playing in the Champions League. So do you really want Calvin Phillips or a player of his ilk who's playing week in, week out against Wycombe Wanderers and Burton Albion?
Yeah.
Or do you want someone that's going out with like Bayern Munich and playing against that quality of player and holding their own? And it's a tough one, but I think you have to really trust in the quality of that player, but they shouldn't be a mainstay.
Yeah.
in the side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Like that again comes back to the form thing. I think those guys can be in
Yeah.
contention for one of those form spots, if we call it that, where like
Oh yeah.
so like they're not part of your core squad as such.
Yeah.
One thing that surprised me as well, along with Calvin Phillips, was Jude Bellingham's. I've mentioned him, his
Yeah.
inclusion, and again at
Yeah.
17, it's quite crazy to see sort of why Southgate has picked him.
Yeah. No. It was. I mean, the quality is obviously there.
Yeah,
The quality is obviously there with Bellingham, and I think in the future he can really be. He could really fill a role that England have missed.
hmm
That deep lying playmaker, really. Um, yeah, no, England have lacked someone with his passing quality that in the last, I'd say five, maybe even 10 years,
potentially. Yeah,
um, potentially. So I can see why Southgate has brought him in. You want to blood him a little bit, but again, it comes down to like what we were saying earlier about the youth teams. Would you rather have him take his time in the youth teams, build up some chemistry around those players, ease his way into the spotlight? Do you really want to throw him in at the deep end and
yeah,
risk burning him out?
yeah. I think that's probably the main thing. It's the pressures that come to you when you're that young.
Definitely.
I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah. This,
that can break someone's career realistically.
there's
So
few players that there's few players that have managed to match up to that. Um, Wayne Rooney, obviously.
yeah.
But again, burnt out by the time he hit 30, possibly before.
I mean,
Um,
it's hard to say because he's still probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest English players ever.
oh, for sure, for
But
sure.
he just,
I don't deny his legacy. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, as you said, he burnt out by 30, but he was still a quality like midfielder. He may not have been
True.
that attacker that he used to be, but he
Yeah.
adapted, and that just showed his
Yeah.
quality.
True.
But
True.
he sort of found his way through the pressures of the young kid coming to Man U at 16, 17.
Yeah.
Then going on to start games week in week out for
Yeah.
United, and
Yeah.
there's not many players like him. That's I guess that's what you're trying to say, and
Yeah.
it's a bit of an issue to include those guys in major international tournaments.
I hear that. I hear that. And I feel like a lot of managers, anyway, they play the ego card, kind of like, oh, I brought in this player into the starting lineup. I brought him into the squad. I showed faith in him.
Yeah.
Um, that's, why he is where he is now. And, maybe that's at the detriment of the future of the player.
hmm
Um, but no, it will be interesting to see whether Jude makes it on the plane.
hmm
I don't think he's getting consistent enough game time personally, but
we'll
no,
get to that. We'll get
it's
to that.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
And my final sort of quick question is, so if you don't play for your club, we've mentioned this. If you don't play, if you're not playing consistently, should you even be in contention to get a call up? And that's if you exclude injuries from that, because obviously, one of your top players could be injured for, up until a month or two before the tournament. I'd still include them, but
Oh, okay.
there's guys that maybe aren't playing at all or barely for their clubs. But yeah, what do you think about that?
I mean, football is it requires, consistency, a consistent game time rather, to be able to truly showcase what you can do and be able to perform at that highest level and build up your confidence, I think. So personally, I wouldn't take someone that's playing maybe once a month. I'd want someone to be, really getting a lot of game time, showing what they can do on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Being able to build up form really and take that into the tournament. I think it's tough to bring someone in that you haven't seen what they can do for the past year. They haven't developed, say, even
Yeah.
because of that lack of game time. You don't know where they're at, really. It's a really unknown quantity. Yeah, I think it's interesting on the injury point as well. Like, sure, I think your top players you take, but
Yeah.
yeah, no one's going to take, John Joe Shelby if he gets injured, are they?
No.